Ferencváros to new glory and championship title. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a distinguished occasion. I also rarely have a part in it. Therefore, as we have always done, we do not consider the signing of the contract as a formality, but as a serious matter. And since we consider it a serious matter, we would like to express our respect for our partners by not simply dismissing this contract, not accompanying it with diplomatic remarks from the government, but recalling some of the fundamental economic, philosophical, and economic policy considerations that lie behind the government's economic policy, on which it is based, and which led us to the agreement. I am doing this so that you can also see stability and predictability in this contract. Moreover, this is not the first time I have stood before you in the minutes before signing a contract, so I recall my experiences that this is a circle where you can speak directly, as is perhaps appropriate with entrepreneurs, only clearly and directly. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear General Assembly, dear Mr. President, we have come together to sign this agreement between the government and the Chamber of Commerce. Let us remind ourselves that we have been cooperating for 15 years. So to everyone who is here, to those who are not here, and to those who can no longer be here, we recall your memory and would like to thank you on behalf of the government for the contracts concluded over the past 15 years and for implementing the promises made therein. Thank you very much. MKJK is a distinguished partner for the government. Many organizations try to represent the interests of entrepreneurs. We express our respect to them. But at the same time, we acknowledge that the MKJK is a key strategic partner of the Hungarian government. Therefore, what we think about businesses and entrepreneurs is reflected in cooperation with the MKJK. This is the basis and origin of our cooperation. In this context, I probably don't need to talk at length about the fact that the future of Hungary depends not only on politics and parties, of course, but primarily on performance and partnership. We agreed with President Nagy Elek that the basis of a strong economy is a strong entrepreneurial class. There is no successful management, no successful economic policy without a strong entrepreneurial class. And we also agreed with Mr. Elek that the government's job is to facilitate the successful operation of businesses. I recall that we set clear goals for 2022 in our previous agreement. I recall that the economy must be made more competitive, taxes on labor must be reduced, digitalization must be supported, and the opportunities for domestically owned small and medium-sized enterprises must be expanded. We described this in the previous treaty, and as we heard from the President earlier, we also recorded it in a number of specific points. Today, 3 years later, we stand here and can state with due modesty, but nevertheless with pride, that we have fulfilled what we undertook. You know it feels good. We have introduced personal income tax exemption for young people under 25. We have reduced social contribution tax in the last 3 years. We have simplified and made it cheaper to start a business, although we still have work to do here. We have reformed dual training at your request to make skilled labor more accessible to domestic companies. We have protected the overexploited support system, and we have extended the overhead protection fund to small and medium-sized enterprises. In total, more than 40,000 young people started their own businesses with the support of our startup program. We agreed, we adhered to, and we implemented it. Ladies and gentlemen, that's enough about the past. As for the future, we are facing a new choice. But not only in a political sense, which everyone knows and maybe even talks about, but also in an economic sense. I see that Hungary has two options, two paths. One is the path of tax increases. It is not worth burying your head in the sand. This policy, the policy of tax increases, came to the fore as the elections approached. If you listen to the parliamentary debates, if you watch the political speeches, There are already ideas based on an alternative tax increase to the current government's policy. The opposition does not want to introduce new types of taxes. We know this from them. Wealth tax and real estate tax. They would raise the personal income tax, and they are urging the introduction of new EU green taxes. We also know that in many European countries and in Brussels, left-wing parties are in power. We know this economic policy. It does not really believe in work, in performance, but always in central redistribution. We also know what this means in practice. Unfortunately, we are not children anymore. We all experienced everything that happened before 2010 with an adult mind. We just don't remember it, or we don't bring it up often enough. But I'll try anyway. Let's remember that before 2010, the middle class always had the short end of the stick. They tried to introduce a property tax on family homes. We were only able to avoid this with the help of the Constitutional Court. They tried to introduce a property tax on small businesses. And employees had a much higher rate. Don't forget that before 2010, the average income, but not the rich, was taxed at a rate of over 30%. Ladies and gentlemen, the other option, the other path that lies before you and before Hungary, is what we call the path of national economic policy. This consideration, this policy, is on the side of performance. When it comes to the economy, we are not interested in ideology. We make our decisions based solely on common sense. That's why we reduce taxes. We chose the path of tax reduction, because we believed, and I think this has been proven, that if there is less burden on businesses, there will be more jobs. Wages will be higher, exports will be greater, and the country will be stronger. Since 2010, we have halved the employee benefit, halved the personal income tax, and halved the corporate tax. Thanks to the transformation of the tax system, at least I believe so, there are 1 million more people working in Hungary. The average wage has tripled. We don't remember this today. 4 times the minimum wage. And economic performance in Hungary has multiplied. Dear delegates, we all know that left-wing economic policy does not encourage entrepreneurship, does not encourage success, is fundamentally based on inertia, and is more about taxing the middle class, curbing performance, ideologically based reconstruction, and, I believe, ultimately about uncompetitiveness. We must face the facts, even if they are unpleasant. Today this mindset, today this left is controlling Brussels. I'm not just talking about Hungary, but about Europe. Since the left is controlling Brussels, it is so bureaucratic, opaque, and everyone can see that it is actually anti-business. There are plans on the table in Brussels that, citing support for Ukraine, set expectations for Hungary that would wipe out our country economically. They are constantly demanding that we raise taxes on labor. They are demanding that we introduce new green taxes. They are constantly forcing us to take out joint EU loans, and they are constantly regulating our businesses. This is the situation. You know my position. We all do this. The Hungarian government is not an executive office of Brussels. We are convinced that the Hungarian economy must be managed along Hungarian economic interests. We prefer to argue, sometimes veto, then negotiate, and finally agree, as we did in the case of European Union funds. Ladies and gentlemen, deeply respected great president, the government's economic policy, which unfortunately is of course not flawless, no one would dare to say this, but has been stable, predictable, and constant in its direction for 15 years. You know our basic principles well. I will now briefly recall them for you. Our economic policy is based on 5 clear statements. These statements, these principles, these views, these have been tested in practice, they stem from our experience, and these views have been tempered in governance. And it is on the basis of these considerations that we have discussed this treaty with you, and that is why I will sign it. Our first such proposition is that in Hungary, the basis of the economy is work, not aid. We do not believe that the country can be restored by social subsidies. I am convinced that only the honor of work and respect for performance can move the economy forward. Our second view follows from the first. Those who work should be supported, never criticized. A government that burdens work is actually governing against the future of the country. That is why we stand on the side of working people, whether they are entrepreneurs or their employees. Our third proposition is that the key to competitiveness is tax cuts. Many people in Brussels think that competitiveness can be bought with subsidies. We believe, and I know, that this is not the case. The best support is to let entrepreneurs and people work and not take away the value they produce. I am convinced that where there is a left-wing government, sooner or later, I think sooner, the economic downturn will occur. I think everyone in Hungary knows this. That's why I hope I'm not deceiving myself, that there are left-wing emotional entrepreneurs in Hungary. But since the economy in Hungary is not managed on the basis of ideology, the leftists know that, and left-wing entrepreneurs can at least support our economic policy. If there is performance, even on the left, then they won't be left out. They can't be left out of anything. They are also part of the national economy. And finally, my fifth proposition. It sounds like we will achieve our economic goals this year as well. I will continue where our great leader left his thought to dominate. We don't explain, we don't complain, we don't point fingers, we don't whine about the war or the sanctions. That's it. But the goals we set must be achieved even under such circumstances. This year, the most important government objective that we have undertaken is to implement the largest tax reduction program in Europe targeting families. And I guarantee that no matter what happens, we will do this. We are talking about a program worth 4 trillion forints. Dear entrepreneurs, I must finally talk about an essential element of our economic policy, which is our common child with you. In today's world, it doesn't sound so strange. This is the Széchenyi card. With the Széchenyi card, we are giving 320 billion forints to businesses. And within the framework of the Demian Sandor program, we are mobilizing several 100 billion forints to revitalize the economy. Dear Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, for my part, I see only one serious risk that could shake the future of the Hungarian economy, and that is Ukraine's accession to the European Union, if only it were forced down their throats. You are obviously familiar with the international and domestic political debates related to this. I hope that the talk of what Ukrainian EU membership would mean for your businesses and for the Hungarian national economy in general will not escape your attention. During the 3 years of the Russian-Ukrainian war, ladies and gentlemen, the Hungarian economy lost more than 20 billion euros. That much more would be in the Hungarian economy today. If it weren't for it, there would have been no war. Therefore, the success of the American president's peace efforts is in our fundamental interest, no matter what we think about America or the American administration in power. It is our fundamental interest not to fuel the war with words, soldiers, or weapons. So it is easy to see that peace is our fundamental interest. It is also important to see that Brussels' grand plan is to keep Ukraine alive and maintain the Ukrainian army. The situation is serious. We are talking about maintaining a 1 million-strong Ukrainian army with a lot of EU money, and that is why they are forcing the Ukrainians into the EU. Brussels is indicating that it either does not see or does not want to see that this will bring down the European economy, and I think Hungary would get involved in this. We cannot and will not take on the financial burden, nor the sending of our EU subsidies to Ukraine, nor will we take on the Ukrainian mafia. We will not take on Ukrainian GMO foods, nor the collapse of the Hungarian social welfare system, which Ukrainian EU membership would entail even in the short term. The opinion vote is currently underway. I encourage you, as Hungarian entrepreneurs who are particularly concerned about this issue, to express your opinion and to participate in this vote. Ladies and gentlemen, the content of the agreement was presented by President Nagy Elek. I agree with the words of the reviewer. We have reached an agreement that meets all of President Nagy-Elek's requests. I do not promise that this will always be the case, but in this case, it is certainly true for this agreement. What did the president ask for? He said that the agreement should include bureaucracy reduction, tax reduction, and tax simplification. We have done this work. Moreover, we didn't just do it on paper. I would also cite the Demian Sandor program as a good example. It's a quick and simple program. 1885 businesses can apply for tax exemption. Do you know what I'm talking about? The entrepreneur brings one forint, and we add another forint. It's an old disincentive. I see there are some gray-haired people who still remember our first government between 1998 and 2000, when the first disincentive began. So, back to the present. 1,885 businesses submitted applications. They requested a total of 137 billion forints, with the promise that they would also contribute at least that much. Unfortunately, the original funds available would have only allowed for the support of 450 applications. So at its last meeting, the day before yesterday, the government decided to add an additional 82 billion forints to the 48 billion forints. So the overall amount of this Demian Sandor program supporting small businesses will increase to 130 billion forints. A simple and fast program, just as the president requested. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I must say that I am convinced that the economic policy that we are pursuing, the government's plans, are supported by the majority of the country. Staying out of the war, stopping migration, and supporting families, supporting small and medium-sized businesses. We have been able to do this before, and we will continue to be able to do this. We will maintain the trust of the people, and we will implement the agreement that we are about to sign, not only in 2025, but also in 2026 and the years after that. Thank you for your respectful attention.